Find out 3 ways to cruise through France.
Welcome to Vacation Mavens, a family travel podcast with ideas for your next vacation and tips to get you out the door. Here are your hosts, Kim from Stuffed Suitcase and Tamara from We3 Travel.
Hey, Tamara, long time no talk. It's like we talked at the beginning of the summer and now it's the end of the summer. It's like, where did time go?
Well, it's not just you. I pretty much didn't talk to my family or hardly anyone for about 6.5 weeks. So it's really kind of crazy to think like I missed the entire summer here in New England. But I had a very busy and exciting summer. I think we kind of alluded to it on our last podcast, but then it got even busier with some last minute additions.
Yeah, you really embraced the whole empty nest, solo Gen X woman exploring the world. You headed out, first of all, I know you went and met up with a couple of friends and toured a bit of Scotland and saw some really cute Scottish Highland cows, which is one of Mia's favorites. But then I know that you headed into Europe, into France more specifically, and you had quite the little adventure. So do you want to tell our listeners all about that today?
Yeah. Well, the good thing was I was in Europe for 6.5 weeks, but I only took, a flight there and a flight back, which, was kind of nice. Although I can tell you about a lot of train stations. I have a lot of experience there. But yeah, I flew to Edinburgh and we did a road trip around Scotland and then a road trip around Wales, which Wales, by the way, we won't cover it on this podcast, but such an underrated, really wonderful destination that is like affordable, not crowded, not crazy hot, just like all these great things about it. So I have a blog post on my website that I will link to in the show notes about how to do a road trip around Wales. And one for Scotland will be coming soon, but it's not there yet.
Awesome. Do you think the Wales one, is that like an alternative to Scotland or an alternative to like England? Or what would you say it's kind of a good, like, hey, if you want to save money and avoid the crowds, go here instead of there? What would you say it's?
I would put it more as an alternative to England.
Okay.
So they have like this wonderful coastal path and they just have these beautiful cliffs and just coastal towns, like really beautiful seaside towns. Whereas Scotland is a little bit more rugged and green and just magical in that way. So, I would say like, an alternative to England, but, it's easy to get to, easy to get around. I really loved it. So
awesome.
But then, then we took the train from Cardiff in Wales, which is the capital, where we ended up over to London. I stayed with my friend Katya for a couple of days. And then
Katya,
I took and then I got to go see her kids in a dance recital and everything. We had a lot of fun. And then I took the Eurostar down to Paris to start my month in France. And
that's amazing.
It was all about cruising, which is so different for me, right? Like, I'm sure our listeners think, well, like Kim's been on a lot more cruises than Tamara, but different kind of cruising.
Yeah, exactly. Not ocean cruising.
A lot smaller. If you guys remember back, it was probably 2019 or maybe early 2020 before the pandemic, when we had Dana Freeman on and she talked about small ship cruising and she had mentioned barge cruising, which was something I had never heard of before. But I ended up taking 2 different barge cruises and 1 river cruise. And so each was a different experience. And I'm happy to kind of talk through what is a barge cruise, as I feel like that's so still unheard of here in the US. And then like, how does that compare to a river cruise, and kind of get into it a little bit.
I mean, it's a unique aspect that I think people don't consider. And I saw some of your posts on the whole idea of the canals and the rivers, and it's really cool. And I think it's a very different expectation of travel than ocean cruising. So I definitely want to hear all about it, because the other thing is you went on a couple different lines and then a couple different classes of service. So did you want to talk about like river versus barges, or do you want to talk about kind of your first experience, what you did, or how did you want to dive into it?
Maybe I'll talk about barges and kind of explain that a little bit and then go into river cruising, and then we can kind of compare the two different ones.
Perfect.
But barge cruising really started in France, down in southern France in the Canal du Midi. And it was really that they have all these canals that were used for transportation, and they had barges that were used to transport goods. And then once things kind of moved to rail and road, it was like, what are we going to do with these barges? And people turned them into hotel barges and started taking tourists around on them. And so there's a couple of kind of cruise lines that do barge cruising. And one of them that I did was European Waterways. So European Waterways has something like, I'm going to say like, I probably should look it up, but I think it was like 17 or 27, one of those numbers, different barges that they are corporate run. And those are throughout Europe. So I think there's like 7 or 8 different countries that they have barges in, including Scotland and Ireland and Italy and some other places. But France is kind of like the hub of canal barge cruising. Right. There's another barge company called French Country Waterways, but then there are a lot of just independently owned hotel barges. And so it's a lot to sort through if you're interested in wanting to do a barge, because there's some barges that are only 3 cabins. Some have up to 10 cabins. There's, kind of your cozy classic one that has smaller cabins and not as many amenities. And then you have like your very high-end barges that are run by like the Belmont Hotel Group. And those are like ultra luxury with like large staterooms and suites and things like that.
But all of them are pretty small groups, it sounds like.
Yeah, so it could go from like 2 people to like 20 people.
Wow.
But I think most of the time a barge is going to be about 8 people.
Okay.
So definitely it's more like, a yacht charter or something like that.
Like almost like an extended family would get the whole boat or whatever and have it as a little multi-gen vacation or something.
So I think, once I talk through it, if you're interested in this type of travel, the people to go to are Barge Lady Cruises. They're actually a travel agent that handles, all they sell is barge cruises.
Oh, good. So they do all the research, so you don't have to deal with
exactly
who's who and what's
what.
They
know the independent ones. They know the corporate ones.
Yeah.
They know like if you're looking for this or that, like, whether it's itinerary or style or room or amenities or, whatever you're looking for, they're going to help point you in the right direction. And they were the ones that invited me on my first barge cruise, which was through the canals in Burgundy. And that was with a independently owned hotel barge called the Hotel Barge Elisabeth. Oh. And it's owned by two guys that are just wonderful. One is the Captain David, and one is the chef, Chef Matthew. And so when you have an independently owned barge, I think like it's kind of think about it with anything. Like if you have an independently owned restaurant and it's like the owner chef and right. You have people that care so much about the level of service and everything being
amazing,
very high quality. And so whether it's small cabins or big cabins, it's like the service is where it really stands out. Yeah. And then like the second barge that I did is with European Waterways, and that's corporate owned. So like on that barge, for example, we had like a substitute captain, even though he had been captain like on barges for like 14 or 20 years or something like that. He was filling in for like another guy. So he had never worked with this crew before. And service was wonderful. It was fabulous, but it's just like slightly different when you have corporate owned versus, privately owned.
Probably like staying at a, hotel versus staying at like a little privately owned B&B or something like that.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
a little different. Yeah.
Exactly. But the thing, so I tried to think like, because I had these conversations with people when I was on board too, and I tried to think like, how do you really explain barge cruising? And like, it doesn't really compare to cruising as much. So if you think like, oh, well, ocean liners, or even a river cruise, it's not the same product. It's not the same thing. It's first of all, it is one of the most relaxing ways to travel that I've experienced beyond just like going and sitting on a beach,
wow.
At a resort somewhere. I found it so chill and so slow paced, but with such amazing service and fantastic food. And that I'm a foodie.
Yes, yeah.
But oh my goodness, the food was like beyond.
That's
like
awesome.
Beyond, like especially on the Hotel Barge Elisabeth. So, so good. And it's just catered to you so nicely. So just to back up, so the first one that I went on was through Burgundy, and that was the Hotel Barge Elisabeth. That was the privately owned one. They only do charters typically. So they won't do where you can just book one cabin.
Gotcha.
I happened to be on a media cruise, so I was with another writer and I was with a PR person. So it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But typically it would be like, I have a group of friends, I have a family, multi-gen or like whatever. Or even they've had couples like just take the whole barge just for a honeymoon or, something like that. So they only do charters.
Okay.
And honestly, I really think that that's the way to go if you can afford it, because it's a small group. So the other one that I did was on the Canal du Midi, and my friend Michelle came with me, and that was with European Waterways on the barge on Jody, and that had 4 cabins, but only 3 of them were full. So we were with a couple. The other cabin was 2 friends. All 4 of them were from Australia, and then it was Michelle and I. And you're spending a lot of time with strangers. So these meals are incredible, but they're also kind of long. So you're like eating, with people, and you're doing your outings with people, and then you're in, a relatively small space with people that are strangers, and so you have a dynamic there that could work or could not work, depending on how people gel, right? Like, whereas on like a larger cruise ship, you're always going to have like ways to get away from people, where there's more people that you could mix with, right?
Well, and there's more activities. So even if you have to have one meal together, like you're busy the rest of the time, you're not seeing the other people very often or something. So
I think like it's nice that there is an opportunity with these companies to just book a cabin to try it.
Yeah.
Because, not everyone can charter a boat, or has people to travel with. But I think that if you really want the best experience, chartering would be the way to go. And European Waterways definitely will charter as well, but they also offer individual cabins, whereas the Hotel Barge Elisabeth, at least this privately owned one, only does charters.
Yeah. And like some people might like being with strangers and like chatting. Yeah. I just traveled with our friend Lindsay, and she loves like meeting new people when she travels and talking to people. So some people are like that. I'm not like that, but some people are.
So I think that that's something to think about for sure. And the other way that I kind of describe it is that it's kind of like renting a villa where you have a private chef and you have a housekeeper and you have a private tour guide that comes every day to take you on really cool excursions. It's just that villa is like floating on a canal.
Yeah. Okay, good to know.
Because it's a lot more of that experience than like your typical kind of cruise feeling experience. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, are they typically a week long? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you board, at least both of the ones that I did, and I think this is pretty typical, you board on a Sunday and you get off on a Saturday.
Okay.
So Sunday afternoon to Saturday morning. So you have 5 full days of, being on board.
Right.
With excursions and stuff. And basically there's a captain and a pilot, the guy that drives or I shouldn't say guy because there are women captains. The person that drives the boat and manages the whole boat. Sometimes there's a crew, like a deckhand.
Right.
There's always at least one host or hostess, and that person is responsible for like serving meals, cleaning, the cabins, and basically like catering to your every need. Like it's really high service. Mm-hmm. It's kind of amazing. Like you're sitting up on deck and somebody's like, would you like a drink? It's really, but in a non-obtrusive, non-annoying, just like in a very high service kind of way.
Nice.
And then there's the chef. And then there's also a tour guide.
I was just going to,
So the tour guide doesn't typically stay on board, but they show up every day and they take you on an excursion.
And so it's a set excursion for everyone. They go at the...
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and there's no kind of choice to it. It's just like, this is what we're doing today.
Which is kind of nice.
Yeah, if you didn't want to do it, I guess you can stay on the boat, but the boat's just going to be sitting there, So,
yeah.
So you go out, and like some of the things that we did on the first one, we went to a town where we had like a little, guided walking tour of the town, and then we had free time to ourselves. We did like one day we went to these caves where there are prehistoric cave drawings in there, and we had private tour of that. One day we had a full day tour of like where it was like a wine tasting in town and like another wine tasting, and we had lunch in town in Chablis. They tend to do like one meal off the barge for each week, each excursion.
Yeah.
And then, another town. So it was like a mostly half day. One thing I really liked about the Elisabeth is that it alternated. Like it was not like every other, but like some were morning excursions, some were afternoon excursions, which was really nice because then you're like, oh, I'm going to sleep in today, or I'm just going to like relax,
Yeah, and that's one thing about cruise excursions I hate is like you get into port and it's like you got to get up and go. You got to get up and go, if you want to take part. And that was one thing we noticed with European like ocean cruises is you're go because you have a port every day and you want to get the most out of the port days. So
yeah, and like you have to, and it's just nice to kind of feel like you can do things in your own time. Like on the Elisabeth, it's like breakfast will be out here at 8 and it'll be here until like 10:30. So it's like come out when you want and have it when you want, and then lunch is at a certain time and dinner's at a certain time. And in the evening before dinner, they'll serve you their cocktail and a little aperitivo. And it's just like, but when you're sailing or cruising, it's very slow. So it's really peaceful. The canal is very, very calm.
Yeah, I was going to say, you had no issue with seasickness. Yeah, that's awesome.
Definitely not.
So cool.
Super calm, really slow, chill. And like, I brought a book up onto the deck. I'm sitting in this like comfy, couch, like outdoor furniture. And I'm thinking, I'm just going to sit here and read a book. And I couldn't even read a book because it's just so cool to kind of like watch the landscape go by. We're going past like vineyards and fields of sunflowers and things like that.
I would have so many like video time lapses and stuff.
Yeah, I do.
My phone
because you're
so
going
full.
through the locks, which are really kind of fascinating too. Like when we were on the European Waterways on the Canal du Midi, we do this one thing where it's like 7 locks, and it's basically like an elevator. So it has to raise you a huge amount, but you do it through like this series of 7 locks. And cool. All these people come and like stand on the edges to like watch the boats go through. And
we do that in Seattle. We have the Ballard locks here, and we used to always take our family, and that's our tourist thing, is to go watch the Ballard locks. Yeah. It's pretty cool. And the Panama Canal is probably one of the most famous ones,
and I loved, like, especially when I was on the Elisabeth, like, if I wanted to get off and like walk, like we'd stop at a lock and I'd just kind of like hop off the boat and I'd be like, okay, I'll meet you at the next one.
Oh, I wondered about that.
Just take a walk.
I remember Dana talking about that, how you could just like kind of stroll along and see it cruising along next to you.
And I walk pretty fast, so half the time I got there first, but there's always a towpath, and you're just going past like fields and stuff.
Okay.
And they do have bikes. You just have to give them a little more notice. If you want to ride the bikes, they'll take them off and you can, go for a longer bike ride and then meet back up with them. And you stop each night in like a small village. So some of these villages were like teeny tiny, like it's like a cluster of houses and like maybe there's a boulangerie, and like that's kind of it. And some of them were a couple larger towns where you could, like walk into town and like do some shopping or something like that. But most of it was just like a little village, but you could walk along the canal and there's like little cafes alongside, and it's just really peaceful.
Yeah, so you're like selling me. It sounds like Paul's ideal way to travel. He would love it as long as we didn't have to be with other people. So it's just like, okay, Paul, we just have to be rich enough to be able to charter a barge cruise.
I mean, you know what they say about cruising is the nice thing is you get to see things without like moving and unpacking and all that. And I really feel like in the barge, it's really like that. I mean, the downside is like the cabins are small for sure. They range anywhere from like 100 square feet to like 250 square feet, but that's on like the ultra luxury ones. So I think mine, not sure how big it was on the Elisabeth. The one on the Anjodi was definitely like a little under 100 square feet. So it was tight with two of us in there.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me at all. On the first one, I had my own room.
Right.
I had a queen bed. I had nightstand on either side. So there was room to walk along that side and like a little bathroom, and I had storage, but it's smaller than a river cruise ship cabin. And it's smaller than, most other ocean liner cabins, but some of them have different amenities. The Elizabeth, for example, like didn't have a hot tub or a little pool, but I really loved the outdoor seating that they had because it was like really comfortable lounge seating. But on the Anjoti, they had more of like a picnic table with chairs, but they did have a hot tub. So like you have these kind of trade-offs, and it just depends on what you want to do. But to be honest, like because the Anjoti is in southern France, it was a lot hotter. And so like we went on the hot tub one day, but then it was a little too hot for the hot tub, But I would just say it's really relaxing. It's really nice if you could do it with a group of friends or family that it is on the pricier side, but you think about the things that are included. I mean, the food, like I said, gourmet, exceptional, like just made, it's as if you're going to like just a wonderful restaurant every day.
Yeah.
Whereas like, larger cruise ships, it has to be made in much bigger quantity. Yeah. It just can't be the same quality.
Right.
And just the level of service was just fantastic. And to me, like our hosts, like Matthew and David, like I want them to come visit me and stay in my house. Aww. Like they were just like, they made it wonderful. It was just like a really wonderful crew. It was just a really great, both of them were really, really great experiences.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, is it all inclusive then, except for I'm assuming then tipping? Do you tip? Like who would you then tip?
You do tip. And so that's not included. Typically they say like 5 to 10% of your cruise.
And it goes to everyone,
and it gets split between everybody.
Good. Okay, good. Because I hate that, like, tip the this much to this person, this much to the guy, this much, Okay.
Yeah, so it includes like all of your your private excursions. And you think like when we went to go see the cave drawings, we went in like after a group, like a public group that was like 50 people, and then like we went in like the 4 of us, and it's just like, so you're getting these private excursions, you're getting transfers, you're getting the food, you're getting, obviously the accommodation. The wine was incredible. Like, I mean, I was like, I can't have any more wine. Like it was too much wine. Cause like at lunch, they were like, ready to serve you a different wine with every course. And I'm like, I cannot have wine at lunch and then go do something. It's not happening. But then dinner, it was like, here's your, with your starter. Cause they did like beautiful wine pairings, but by the end, I'm like, I don't like sweet wines or fortified wines anyway. Like I'm good. And but it, all of your drinks, like whatever you want, like the whole time it's included. So you don't need to ever think about things like that.
Awesome. Very cool. So then let's contrast it to river cruising, because you did 1 or 2 of those.
I did one river cruise.
Okay.
So this is the very first time I've done a river cruise. It's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I cruised with AmaWaterways, which is one of the pretty well-known river cruise lines that are out there. They have tons of different itineraries all throughout Europe. They even have, I think it would be really cool to do one on the Nile. They have one in Egypt.
Oh, that would be
They're
cool.
introducing some in Colombia. So they're definitely, like I said, one of the very well-known brands when it comes to river cruising. And I've heard really good things about the food too.
Okay.
So I was very excited.
Yeah.
Glenn and I have looked at doing different ones. Like the Danube is the most popular kind of route. And a lot of people like to do it for the Christmas markets.
That's what I was going to say. I want Christmas market river cruise. That's mine.
I'd still love to do that as well. I'll do that with you any day.
Well, we need to figure it out, make it happen, because my family's not going to go with me. They're like, those trips you want to spend the money when people really want it.
And so Glenn and I have looked at this like years and years ago. We looked at this Taste of Bordeaux river cruise because, we like wine regions. And so this came up, and I just wanted full disclosure. I was hosted on all of these experiences. I paid for my own airfare and tips and things like that. But the Taste of Bordeaux was something that we were interested in. So we decided to do that one.
It's nice that your husband got to see you at one point during your 2 month sojourn.
I know. I hadn't seen him for like a month.
I know. It was good.
He met me there. We did that. We went to Biarritz on the coast of France for a few days, and then he flew home, and then I went and did the other barge.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry. Anyways, nice. Go ahead. But
so a river cruise, like the ship that we were on was called the Ama Dulce, and it holds, I think, 144 passengers.
Oh, that's significant.
But so it's not. It's so funny because on the second barge, people were like, well, I wouldn't do one of those giant river cruises. And I'm like, giant? Like, have you seen the 5,000 person ships that are out
I know,
there?
Exactly. Meanwhile, I'm about to go, like, I have a small ocean trip coming up that's 320 some passengers. And I'm like, oh, it's so tiny.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. So
I mean, river cruise boats are, smaller. So you don't have, it's definitely a different dynamic. Look, I've done a few ocean cruises and it's a different dynamic than the big ships. And our ship was only half full. So with only 63 passengers.
Oh, wow.
So we had tons of space.
I was just going to say lots of space just in the community area.
Yeah, you never had to worry. Even our excursions were sometimes only 7 or 8 people on our excursion. Wow. So in terms of like what's similar, with a river cruise, all your excursions are included, at least AmaWaterways, all of your excursions are included. And it's usually like you can choose like one of 2 or 3 a day. Sometimes there are 2 a day, but you always have like a choice of different types of things that you can do. Mm-hmm. Your wine and beer is included at meals, as well as they have a sip and sail cocktail hour, and they have like a signature cocktail every night. So your alcohol is included during that time as well. Okay. So it's a little bit more inclusive than some of the cruise ships that people might be familiar with.
Ships, yeah. But not as like all inclusive as you don't have to ever think about it, So, right. Okay.
Which honestly, like they kept saying, oh, if you want to put your credit card down. And I was like, well, why do I need to put a credit card down? I'm not paying for anything. And then like one night we were in the lounge like late at night and Glenn like ordered a scotch. We were talking to some people and there was a bill and I'm like, oh, you do have to pay. But usually like I've had wine with dinner and I'm done. Like I don't need a drink after that. Yeah. So I never even realized until like the 4th day of the cruise that you actually had to pay occasionally. Okay. So, I mean, like I said, there's plenty of opportunity to have drinks. It was not.
So is it like you get one beer or wine at dinner?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Like just as long as you're sitting at the dinner table, they'll just keep it coming. But if you want to go have your like scotch afterwards, then that's
the cocktail hour before it's like, whatever, I would get a glass of wine at the cocktail hour. Then I would go down to dinner and then it was whatever wine you wanted there. And then, one time I like carried my wine to the room, to the lounge afterwards.
Okay, cool. So not really unless you really just, then you belong on a different cruise ship. If you need more than that.
There's one guy like that.
Yeah, I bet. Yep.
There's one guy at the very beginning where I was just like, all right, the guy with that hat, let's just stay away from this trip.
It's like, I'm ready for a party. This is my vacation.
Yeah. But, look, river cruises, I have an article out, which I'll link to in the show notes, which kind of explains everything about it. But I think one of the things that people want to know is like, what is the demographic? Yeah. Because they have a reputation of being older. And so it definitely is like an older crowd. I would say the majority of people were probably 60 and up.
Okay.
Glenn and I, we're in our 50s. So we were
the youngsters.
Part of the slightly younger crew. But there was like 2 couples in their 30s. And then there were a couple like multi-gen families that had like adult children who were probably, a fair amount younger than us. Okay. So there was, all kinds of different like dynamics like that. And when it was really funny. The first night we sat down to, in the lounge, introduce ourselves to this couple and they were like, oh, we thought this would be like much older. And I looked over at them and I'm like, huh? Because you seem much older than I do. But
maybe that's why they thought you guys were so young. They're like, oh man, we thought we'd be speaking with people older than us.
Yeah. But I will say it was like a very active, fit group.
That's awesome.
They have a few different types of excursions. They always had a bike tour, and the bike tour was the most popular tour every time.
Wow.
There'd be like 20 people on the bike tour. So, I mean, props to all those people that want to, get out there.
Were they e-bikes?
No.
I just had this conversation with my daughter about when I was older, I want to get an e-bike. And she's like, at that point, Mom, you really need to be doing the whole bike experience. And I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I did one of the bike tours and it was about 8 miles.
Wow.
And there were some hills and we were going through vineyards. So it was like a dirt road with like potholes and rocks and stuff. So it was a little like, bumpy.
Yep.
And then Glenn, he's a Peloton guy. So he wanted to do more of the bike stuff. And so that afternoon they were doing another bike tour and it went from one town to the other town because the boat was going to sail during that time. Yeah. So it was like, there's no turning back.
Yeah.
You have to get to the next town. And that was like a 17
Kilometer?
Now I'm like, it was a 17 kilometer, but it was a longer, but much tougher.
Oh, wow.
One. And so he was even like, man, I barely made it up that last hill.
My
I'm like,
goodness.
I am so glad I stayed back and did that one.
That's interesting. Okay.
It's really nice though with AmaWaterways, like when you get your packet or if you use the app, for all the excursions, it will tell you like a difficulty level and like how far it is. And it gives you like a lot of information so you can choose what you want to do. And then for the walking tours, there was also always a gentle walkers group. So for someone that didn't have the same mobility, couldn't walk as much, because, you're in France, it's like cobblestone streets,
exactly.
There's hills, like all of that. Yeah. They would have something that was like a little bit more driven with just like a little bit of walking. And I also thought it was really nice. Like when you left the boat, they had, I should say ship, I guess, but when you left the ship, they had a little stand where there were umbrellas, there were walking sticks, and then there were these little like canes that had like a fold out like rest where you could like rest your knee. And like, so I thought that was really thoughtful. Like they were very considerate of like different levels of mobility.
That's awesome. And you said those were all included. All the excursions were included.
Yeah. All included. Yeah.
And there was like maybe 3 or 4 each day to choose from? 2 or 3?
Usually 2 or 3 to choose from.
Always a bike. Always a walk.
Always a bike. Something always involved wine because it was a Bordeaux, river cruise. So there were, usually a wine tasting. Sometimes you could like bike to a wine tasting, get a ride back, or you could, do this wine tasting or that wine tasting. Like there were different options. Some days there were 2 excursions in a day, and one night there wasn't. Maybe there was something like wine related during the day, but they also had this in town. They had like this wine celebration where they basically had us come into a restaurant where there were multiple smaller wine producers that were doing tastings of their wine. And then they had performers. And every night at the end, it's not like a big ship where you're going to have shows necessarily, but every night at the, in the lounge, they would have some type of local performer come on board and do, whatever they do. Like there was a trio, there was a duo, there was one guy that was like doing all classic rock songs. And I actually liked him a lot. So there was something, to do. And then on board, I just did an Instagram reel about it, but there was a hot tub. Some river cruises, I think, have a little pool, but there was a hot tub. There was a small gym. There was a sauna. There was like cornhole and a putting green and those like not life size, but those big chessboards, like outdoor chessboards. There's like a sun deck that has a lot of like lounge chairs. There's like a little walking track around the sun deck, which we were kind of laughing because it's like, I don't even know how many times you'd have to go around to make a mile. But there were people out there, and they actually have a fitness instructor on board too. And the fitness instructor, I felt a little bad for him because he was always like, we're going to be doing this on deck. But he actually got a lot of people to participate usually, but he did dance classes or yoga. So there was really quite a bit to do on board. And I was surprised also, one of the other things that was nice about it compared to like normal cruises, not normal cruises, but larger cruises, is that there was free Wi-Fi, because I feel like most cruises charge for Wi-Fi. And then in the cabins, there were like an entertainment system where you could watch movies and stuff like that, like on demand. And that was all free.
Okay. And and I'm assuming then that you also had said the cabin was more spacious. Like what was the bathroom situation in the barge cruise versus like with the river cruise? I didn't even think about asking that.
Yeah, the bathroom on the barge cruise was tight,
But it was still individual in your cabin?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, still an ensuite bathroom. Just, small, limited storage space, like more of like a shelf.
Yeah.
And just like a small shower where you're, if you're a large person, you're going to have a little bit of trouble, in the smaller shower. Yeah. In the river cruise, I mean, our cabin was 170 square foot, which I had looked up recently, and that seems to be fairly common for like a standard ocean cruise cabin as well, considering that I've never spent the money on the larger suites and things. Exactly. Yeah. But one thing that I really loved about the river cruise is like there was tons of storage. So there was a closet for hanging clothes. Another closet had a lot of shelves. There were some drawers in the desk. There was like a pull-out drawer under the bed. The bed itself was high enough that you could store your suitcases under it. Yeah. Just like I have done in an ocean cruise. Yeah. And then in the bathroom, there was an opening medicine cabinet that had a couple of shelves. And then underneath the sink, there was another cabinet that had a couple shelves. So to be honest, it had more storage than a lot of bathrooms in hotels. Because you know how bathrooms in hotels these days, like sometimes there's nowhere to put anything.
Yeah.
And it had an amazing shower. It had a shower with like all these different settings and great pressure.
Oh, nice.
Really good pressure. So awesome. I think the bathroom on the river cruise was great.
Awesome. And did either of them have, I'm trying to remember your pictures. I know on the barge cruise, you just had like a porthole or a window. What about on the river cruise? Was it the same? Like are there balconies in on either of those kind of ships, or is it all just like a window?
Yeah, so the barge cruise, both of them just had portholes. But the river cruise, ours had they call it a French balcony, but really it's a big sliding door that opens, all the way, but it's just a railing. So there's nothing to step out onto.
So not even a Juliet. It's like
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's really just like you can get fresh air and lean your head out and look around.
Okay.
But I mean, the Ama Dolce, like it might be different on some of the other AmaWaterways. I know when we were in Bordeaux, I saw a couple of other river cruise brands there, and some of them had more like balconies where you sit out on them. So it's something that you can look into for sure.
And then what was the dining like with AmaWaterways?
So the dining, it's really hard to go from the barge cruise to the river cruise.
Yeah. Because private chefs at your whim with 4 other people.
It just can't compare. And so there's that for me to keep in mind. So it's like hard to separate. I will say like most of the people that we talk to, including ones that have been on other river cruises from other brands, really like AmaWaterways food the best. The food was good. And I think my expectation, so it's all about expectations.
Right.
My expectation was that it would be a very French trained kind of chef with like French kind of dishes, like really portraying the local, because it was called the Taste of Bordeaux River Cruise.
Right.
And when I got there, I was like, oh, okay, this is a cruise. Like it doesn't, like this cruise could be on the Danube, it could be on the Rhine. There are some French dishes, but it's not about Bordeaux.
Yeah.
The wines were about Bordeaux and the excursions were about Bordeaux, but the food was kind of like, this is
the AmaWaterways menu.
Cruise. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, what I appreciated a lot was that things were really fresh. So like I would get like a salad every day, and like the greens were super fresh. The veggies were super fresh. Like it was good quality food, and there was a lot of it. So Glenn and I would joke that the servers were disappointed in us because like at lunch there would be like a 4-course thing, and I'd be like, can I just get the salad and like, this other thing? And they were like, don't you want the, and I'm like, no, I don't want the salad plus the cream soup plus the entree plus the dessert. No.
Yeah.
So
lunch.
It was like
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was just like, there were a lot of things, but there was choice, so one thing, so when it comes to the dining, it was open seating. You can go in, you can sit with others if you want. You can get a table by yourself.
Oh, I was just going to ask about that. Yeah. Okay.
And so we ended up like meeting some people where we had dinner with them a few times. A couple times we had dinner by ourselves. A couple times we had dinner with other people. So it was really like whatever you want. Like you don't have to socialize with people. You can socialize with people if you want. I think people are open to it, so I liked that aspect of it. I also, you didn't have, like I said, an assigned table. Dinner was served at a certain time, but say like dinner was served at 7:30. If you walked in at 7:45 or 8 o'clock, it was no big deal.
Okay.
So it wasn't like line up at this time to be ready. So it had like a certain amount of flexibility. And even in the morning, there was like breakfast is in the main dining room from this time to this time. If you get up early or if you get up late, in the lounge upstairs, they're going to have
like continental,
like a little buffet. Yeah. So I liked that a lot, that it felt like you had flexibility.
That's nice.
And there was, like I said, there was plenty of food. Like every day there was a choice of a couple different entrees. There was always a vegetarian menu option. And then there was kind of this section of the menu that was like always available. Like, in other words, if you don't like these two things, you could get like a steak, a Caesar salad, or lunch. It was like you could get pizza or a hamburger, things like that.
Yeah.
So the food, was it like the barge cruise? No, it was not. but it was good. It was plentiful. There were choices, I almost forgot one really good thing. Another thing that's included on the AmaWaterways cruise is they have a special restaurant in the back called the Chef's Table, and you can go to it. It's included in your cruise. You just need to sign up for it when you get there. And then it's a, much smaller experience, and they have like a little open kitchen there, and it is a tasting menu. So you have like a 7-course tasting menu. And I thought the dishes there were really, really good. It was more of that kind of fine dining presentation and stuff like that.
And is that limited, like only once a day or once a trip, or do you can do it anytime you want, or first come, first serve, or how does it work?
It's first come, first serve in terms of booking it. So like when you get there, you should book it, whatever day you want to do it. It was never full when we were there because the cruise was only half full.
Okay.
The thing is I heard someone asking like, well, can we do it twice? They're like, you can, but it's the same menu every day.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's a chef's tasting, but it's not, it's like, this is the menu,
Okay.
So I guess you could do it twice. Like maybe if there wasn't someone else waiting, but you're going to be eating the same thing.
Yeah. Well, good enough. Okay. That still is cool. So, but it's a smaller environment. So that's why you put it in hand. Okay. Very cool.
But I loved our excursions. The crew was fantastic. Like I have no complaints about anyone that we encountered on the AmaWaterways. Like housekeeping, the cruise manager was amazing. The hotel manager was like the happiest, nicest, friendliest guy. Like, everyone was like really fantastic. Like they would remember the waiters, also it's not a huge ship. So they would remember what you like,
like
in
special
terms
orders.
of like your wine or something like that. And so I think,
awesome.
Service, like everything, like I would, I think if you're interested in a river cruise, I would 100% recommend AmaWaterways. I think my comparison between the two is like, even though a river cruise is much smaller and very different in that you have so much longer in port because you are often docking there overnight, it's still a cruise. In terms of like, okay, let's meet like tonight and we're going to go over our itinerary for the next day. And, your excursion leaves at this time, group A, group B, like it has more of that cruise feel.
I wondered.
I guess you do that on a barge cruise, but it's more like the tour guide comes in and he's like, hey, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to leave about that time. Does that work for you? Any question? It's just like so much more casual because it's more intimate.
Yeah, because you had said the barge was like so laid back and it's the most relaxing thing. And so the river cruise upped it up again a bit where you're like other people and there's kind of a set schedule and you kind of got to be like on it a little bit. And so I get what you said, but I think, you can definitely see how it tiers up to then ocean cruising when you've got 1,500 to 5,000 other guests, it just starts getting a lot busier. So would you say like the other thing you talked about with barge cruising was that you visited like the small towns, but sometimes they were cities since you're along a river? Is it like, cause you said a lot of times you're stopping overnight. So what was it like with your stops? Were you going to pretty popular destinations that people would maybe want to go, like tourists would go visit, or were they still like off the beaten path type places?
So for the Taste of Bordeaux river cruise that I did, it was still a little bit more off the beaten path. Like Bordeaux as a city, first of all, loved it. I stayed there for like 3 or 4 days in between the first canal cruise and the river cruise because I, needed a place to go. Yeah. And I loved it. It's like a little Paris, fabulous place to visit. So like Bordeaux, yes, you absolutely want to like go out in the town and experience the town. Even though one of your days of excursions is within Bordeaux, you still want to do a little bit on your own. The other towns that we visited, it's kind of like a lot of it was you could see during the excursion or during the day, like your free time during the day. I didn't need to go like back out at night. I think I heard one person being like, oh, we went to go see if there was like a bar open at night and there wasn't. And I'm like, well, okay, I wasn't going to go do that anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was on the barge cruise, I loved like every night, I just had to go for a walk because the meal was like a lot of food. And I'm like, I cannot walk 10 feet down to my cabin and like go to bed, I need to like,
I know you and I have always
around.
Like that. We like to go walk after we eat.
So I would have dinner and even though it was like getting dark by the time we were done, I would just like take a walk by myself, like either through the town or along the towpath, like as long as it was light, just to have a little bit of a walk. Mm-hmm. I didn't do that really on the river cruise. There's also like, we would go up on deck and like watch the moon or the sunset or, like there's more spaces to go to. And I think a lot with Bordeaux, a lot of what you want to see are the chateaus that you're going wine tasting. And that's, you need transportation for that. Yeah. So, but I think it's very different because if I was to do the Danube and I'm in Vienna and Budapest and Prague, and you're like, I'm totally getting off and like, doing more, so I think it depends on the itinerary.
Okay. Good to know.
But you have the option.
Yeah, of course. Like you don't have to do the shore excursion. You can go do your own thing or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Like there was someone one day, they were like, we just want to not rent the bikes. We just want to like borrow the bikes and do our own, like not do the bike tour, but just go. And they were like, yeah, sure. Here you go.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we wrap up, any other like comparison contrasts or any other things you want to share about the two experiences?
I would just say like with the European Waterways one that I did in southern France, like that on the Canal du Midi, the Canal du Midi is it's where like barge cruising started. So it's a lot busier. It's a lot more popular. And there's also more famous sites to see. So like I really loved in Burgundy, we went to see a couple of towns that were like the cutest, most adorable villages like I've ever seen. But if you're looking for more like famous sites, like the Canal du Midi, with European Waterways, we went to Carcassonne, we went to Narbonne. Now, I've been to this region before, so it's like some of the things that I have done already. Mm-hmm. But we also went to a truffle farm. It's not in season, but they gave us like a demonstration of how the dog looks for truffles. But they also have an olive oil farm, so we did an olive oil tasting. So I feel like when you look at the itinerary, you might, like with European Waterways, you might be more impressed because you like recognize more things. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Yeah. You're like, okay, here's a wine tasting, here's a truffle farm, here's the, like there's a lot of things where you're like, oh, I'm really looking forward to that. Whereas the one in Burgundy, at least for myself, like I'd heard of Chablis, but I hadn't heard of some of these other villages. So it kind of came as just like a nice surprise. But they were, smaller villages. And I will say, like, I know I talked about the differences between like corporate or independent, but I still had amazing food on the European Waterways one, the Anjodi, to the point, like the chef, he was such a sweet guy. We learned that he used to work in a Japanese restaurant. And so we were like, ooh, like we mentioned like how we love ramen. Yeah. And so the last night, for all of these, the last night is like the captain's dinner. Okay. So it's a little more festive on the river cruise, but on the barge cruise, the way it works is you have like champagne or sparkling wine with the entire crew. And then on European Waterways, the captain had dinner with us. And on the other one, they took turns where each crew member would have a course with us. Okay. And then the last one was the chef. Oh, so it was like a cool way to like get to know. Yeah. Yeah. Like it was like a nice little, everyone got a little more dressed up and that kind of thing. So on the captain's dinner, he made like a little ramen for us. And like one of the excursions that we did on European Waterways is we went to the market in Narbonne, which is like a very kind of famous, French market. Mm-hmm. And he asked us like, what, if you see something you want, like, let me know. And so we mentioned, I forget what we had asked for, but he got it. And then he put it out for us for like our little happy hour, and fun. It's just like little things like that that were so nice. And the hostesses were like fabulous. Like just, they took care of everything, always smiling, very friendly, like always kind of getting you what you want. And like, they soon learned that I drink a lot of water, so they were always like bringing me the full pitcher with ice and, just like all of that kind of thing. And so I would say like both of those experiences were really fabulous. It's just like, there's just slight differences between like, a corporate owned versus the independent owned, and chartered versus cabin with, the other people. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. So now I'm like officially a cruiser. Yes. Yeah. That's pretty exciting. You've got more experience than me now. Well, just in those kind of things. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, having the variety of them is good because you've also done your schooner, like sailing cruise thing. Yeah. So you're like doing good. I think in the moral of the story is that you can't be like, well, cruising's not for me. Maybe it never is, but there might be a style of being on a boat that is for you.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm very excited. I don't even think you know about this, but I just got confirmation that in December, I'm going to be going with Windstar Cruises on one of their ships to the Middle East. So I'm going to be doing like a sparkling sands 10-day cruise with them and kind of getting a feel for experiencing that smaller ocean ship cruising, and then also getting to experience the Windstar brand because they are a unique name in the industry, I think. So
yeah.
But I'm excited about that.
And what a unique destination.
Yeah, well, that's part of one of the things is because it's an area of the world that I think that a lot of people want to travel to, but there's, I think especially for Americans, there's a lot of, kind of holdups or maybe concerns or wonders about like, well, how do you put together? And especially as a female, because I'll be traveling alone. And so I said, one of the reasons I'm covering it is from, like you said, empty nester type, even though I'm not quite empty nest yet, but taking our own trips, how to do it feel like you're a little more safe or it's a more controlled environment. And I think cruising offers that as a great opportunity for solo women travelers or women who want to travel with girlfriends. So that's what I'm going to be checking it out for. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I fly into Muscat, Oman, and then out of Dubai and visiting a few places around there like Abu Dhabi and Doha and all that. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But that'll be my smallest ship I've ever been on, which is 320 something. So
I'm sure it'll feel a lot different than a lot of the ones that you've done.
I'm very excited. And I know that Windstar also, while they typically have, like a higher age as their typical demographic, they have like water sports and stuff. They have like a water sports platform off the back. And I know they want to attract some more like, older families in, older kids type thing. So I'll get a feel for it that way as well as being the parent of teenagers, what that looks like. So.
Cool. Well, I have a bunch of articles that I'll link to in my show notes about these different experiences.
Yeah, I've seen some of it going up on your social, so I'm sure people can check that out. And of course, I know for some of you, maybe you haven't checked on Instagram, but at Your Time to Fly, that's where she's at on Instagram. And she shared a lot of little things and some great stories that were really some beautiful scenery and had me dreaming of being in Europe again.
Good. Well, I look forward to catching up next time. Who knows where the world will take us, in between now and then. Yeah. But thanks as always for listening. For those of you that are still subscribed, we thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we will talk to you again later.